The 2020 presidential candidates are back on the campaign trail after last night's showdown in Houston. The top contenders clashed over major issues like health care, immigration, and foreign policy.
Divisions within the Democratic Party were on full display, with moderate candidates like Vice President Joe Biden facing off against progressives like Senators Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. Ed O'Keefe takes a closer look at some of the night's most memorable moments.
Y bienvenidos a Texas.
Houston, we have a problem.
A battle of the Big Ten Democrats in Houston focused especially on the top issue of concern, health care, and how to pay for it.
Costs are going to go up for wealthier individuals, and costs are going to go up for giant corporations.
Former Vice President Joe Biden and other moderates repeatedly pressed Senators Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders for how they would pay for their Medicare for All plan.
My friend from Vermont thinks that the employer is going to give you back if you negotiate as union all these years, got a cut in wages because you got insurance. They're going to give back that money to the employee?
Matter of fact, they will.
Well, let me tell you something. For a socialist, you got a lot more confidence in corporate America than I do.
I trust you to choose what makes the most sense for you, not my way or the highway. Now, I am Asian, so I know a lot of doctors, and they tell me that they spend a lot of time on paperwork, avoiding being sued, and navigating the insurance bureaucracy.
The most combative moment of the night, when former Housing Secretary Julian Castro accused Biden of flip-flopping on whether people who can afford health care would be automatically enrolled in Biden's health care plan.
They do not have to buy in. They do not have to buy in.
Are you forgetting what you said 2 minutes ago?
Are you
forgetting already what you said just 2 minutes ago? I mean, I can't believe that you said 2 minutes ago that they had to buy in, and now you're saying they don't have to buy. You're forgetting that.
The 3-hour debate at Texas Southern University, a historically black university, included calls for stricter gun control in the wake of 2 recent mass shootings in the state.
So background checks and gun licensing, these are agreed to by overwhelmingly the majority of Americans.
It is traumatizing our children. El Paso and Beto, God love you for standing so courageously in the midst of that tragedy.
I met the mother of a 15-year-old girl who was shot by an AR-15, and that mother watched her bleed to death over the course of an hour because so many other people were shot by that AR-15 in Odessa and Midland. There weren't enough ambulances to get to them in time. Hell yes, we're going to take your AR-15, your AK-47. We're not going to allow it to be used against our fellow Americans anymore.
For more on this, let's bring in CBSN political reporter Caitlin Huey-Burns. She's with us now from Houston. Good to see you.
Hey, good morning.
So you were at last night's debate. Are the clear frontrunners still former Vice President Joe Biden, Senators Elizabeth Warren, and Bernie Sanders, or did any of the other candidates have a major breakthrough?
Right. Well, if you were looking for last night to change this debate, this primary significantly, we didn't see that. I think we still have that top tier. We were looking for perhaps a clash between Joe Biden and Elizabeth Warren, since they were at center stage for the first time in this campaign on the same stage together. They went back and forth on health care in the beginning, showing very different visions for the future of the party and for health care. Elizabeth Warren, very supportive of Medicare for all. Joe Biden, of course, not willing to go that far, instead wanting to build on the Obama legacy. But beyond that, we didn't really see much from the two of them. I would say that someone that was needing to kind of show he was back in this race was Beto O'Rourke, and he did that. He was on home turf here in Texas, his native state, and he was able to talk about his recent experiences in El Paso with the shootings there, and talk about the issue of gun safety in America, about gun control, arguing for some pretty significant measures, some very controversial ones for sure. But he was able to show a case for his campaign, show that he was passionate about this particular subject, and show that he's got some momentum to get back in this thing.
Yeah, you know, leading up to this, I kind of wondered if people were going to be taking aim at Biden because he's in the lead, and you know that's what you do. You target the guy who's in the spot that you want to be in. But it didn't really seem that way. Is his future pretty much as it was before the debate?
You know, this was a very different Biden in this debate than we'd seen in past debates. down to the point where, remember in past debates, he would stop the second his time was up, even if he was mid-sentence. We saw him yesterday say, no, I'm going to go overtime, like my other fellow candidates here, too. He seemed to have defenses ready for attacks on his record and attacks on him personally, and also going on the offense on some subjects as well, particularly the issue of health care and Bernie Sanders' plan, wanting to contrast his with the Vermont senators. It was really interesting, too, his reaction to Julian Castro, who was on the other side of the stage, going after Joe Biden pretty relentlessly, bringing up that very sensitive subject, or at least alluding to it, the very sensitive subject of Joe Biden's age, asking him if he remembered what he had said 2 minutes ago. That was something that was very risky for the Julian Castro campaign, because we've seen other campaigns try to go after Joe Biden on the debate stage and see little long-term return on those attacks. In fact, we've seen candidates who go after Biden either fall in the polls later on or drop out entirely. So that was an interesting and very risky strategy, and we're already seeing some negative reaction to that. But that was why I thought Joe Biden was in a different kind of position than he had been in past debates, defensive of himself and kind of ready and prepared to answer a lot of questions.
And Caitlin, I know that a lot of people have focused on that attack by Julian Castro to the former vice president, but I want to focus on another question that was posed to the vice president. And I'm curious what the Biden camp thinks about how the former vice president answers questions that are generally elicited to get a reaction of issues that are facing people today, that they're questioning today. And that was when Lindsay Davis asked him about his comments that he made 40 years ago on the issue of slavery and the legacy of slavery in this country. He, back then 40 years ago, said he is not going to be held responsible for something that happened 300 years ago. Now, again, that was 40 years ago, and all she was asking him to do was to answer whether or not he still believes that. Instead, he sort of pivoted to a question, to an answer about schools and parents and social workers and ultimately record players. And it never really answered the question. And it sort of makes me wonder sometimes if the Biden camp thinks, our supporters, the supporters, which include a large chunk of African Americans, are not talking about this. That's blue check Twitter. That's woke young people. But we don't need to address those kinds of questions because the people who are supporting us are not that interested.
That's very much what the Biden campaign thinks. They are often very critical of the media coverage of Joe Biden, and they point to his significant and enduring support among African-American voters, especially among older African-American voters. And as you guys know, I've been on the ground with Biden in a lot of these early states, Iowa, New Hampshire. But in South Carolina, when I was with him recently, I asked a lot of voters kind of what they made about Joe Biden's gaffes, and a lot of them said that it made him more human, that he was more relatable, and he still has really significant support there, even as he's falling behind in some of those earlier states, at least according to our CBS News Battleground Tracker poll. But they certainly think that this is an issue where other candidates, have tried to go after him on his record here. Remember Kamala Harris in the very first debate successfully critiqued his record and brought it back to her own personal story. We saw her rise in the polls, but she hasn't really been able to keep up so far. She has since fallen. Cory Booker was very critical of Joe Biden's history on criminal justice, particularly that 1994 crime bill, and he really didn't gain momentum either from attacking Biden on that issue. That's not to say that this is not a significant issue for the former vice president moving forward, but as it stands now, as we're talking to voters now, and as we're seeing that reaction, it hasn't really had a negative impact, or at least not an impact that is causing him to give up that front-runner status. Still a very long campaign, still several months to go before voters actually start weighing in. But as it stands now, the campaign, at least as they tell us, feel comfortable in that position.
All right, Caitlin, thank you.
Thank you.